Chiisana Obake is another one of those games based on a show for very young children. That seems to be one of the go-tos for the Famicom's end of life. It feels like the Famicom was now considered to be the hand-me-down console, while the elder siblings had moved on to the Super Famicom. Chiisana Obake was originally a series of children's books. They were about a trio of friendly ghosts named Achhi, Socchi, and Kocchi. In the early 90s, there was an animated show about them, though it had finished first-run episodes by the time this game came out. The game has no plot, but the story of the books and the show is that the three ghosts get along in human society. One is a baker, one is a barber, one is an elementary school student, and they get in hijinks with their magic powers. The game is something that we haven't seen a whole lot of on the Famicom. It's a maze chase. There are 8 worlds with 4 stages each, and in the game your goal is to turn all of the blank squares into filled ones. You have a rope that trails behind you as you walk, and you transform squares if they have a blinking apple in them, or maybe that's a tomato, and you encircle that square with the rope. You can turn over multiple squares at once by surrounding a larger area. There's a time limit on every stage, and on some stages there's enemies you have to avoid. But not all of them. It's not even just the earliest stages that lack enemies. Halfway through the game and you'll still be getting stages that just don't have anything there. Occasionally a filled-in square will transform into a power-up, and if you can encircle it, then you'll collect that power-up. But the power-up only remains in place for a very short period, so if you're not right on top of it when it appears, you're not going to be able to collect it. The most important power-ups, at least early on, are the L coins. When you start the game from the very beginning, you just have one ghost, and the trail behind him is just long enough to encircle one square. When you collect an L coin, you add an extra ghost. So when you have the second ghost, then the trail is long enough to get a 2x1 block. And if you have all 3 ghosts, then you can enclose a 2x2 section. There are other power-ups that will appear, but they are a little bit more complicated to use. You have to hit the B button to cycle through them at the bottom of the screen, and then some of them you activate by tapping A, and others you activate by holding down A. The most common are the Runchers, which are the candies that appear. You tap A to launch them at enemies. Enemies have to be hit twice by candy in order to defeat them, and enemies killed in this method do not reappear. The hand is the stopper, and when you tap B to activate that, all of the enemies freeze in place. The hourglass is the timer, and you have to hold down A to use it. While you're using the timer, the stage timer doesn't tick down. Finally, there's the speeder, and when you hold down A with that ability active, you'll run faster. There's one more thing that you can collect, and those are the flashing squares in the corner. Running on top of one of those automatically wins the stage. After you clear 4 stages, you'll get a password, and the password includes your power-up status. If you manage to run out of lives here, there is no regular continue function that would let you pick up where you left off. Instead, you have to type in the password. Chiisana Obake is not a particularly well-made game. You can really notice it when you're trying to fight off enemies. Because your 3 ghosts, the rope, the enemies, and your shots are all sprites, you'll immediately run into the Famicom's sprite limit when you're working in a horizontal line. And how the game handles this is that it makes your shots and the enemies disappear. Honestly, you're a lot better off just avoiding everything and trying to clear the stages fast than you are trying to do any fancy tricks. If you do that, then the game's trivially easy. The only thing that might give you a remote challenge are the tight time limits on some of the later stages. Well, there's one more thing that will give you a hard time, and that's the precision that they want for when you go around corners. There's a fairly narrow window where you're allowed to turn. Chiisana Obake doesn't seem to be very popular among Famicom fans. The few comments I could find on it were negative, mostly pointing out that it was a game intended for small children that wasn't very good for small children. The one positive thing I have to say about this game is that it's really short. I'd expect most people to be able to beat it in about half an hour or so. There's just nothing interesting in this one, and what little content they have doesn't really work very well. There's only a few enemies and they don't really seem to be interested in chasing you. The power-ups seem weirdly ineffective. Moving around the maze winds up feeling annoying. There's just no good reason to play this one.